It's time for another one of my 1997 year in review videos. This time I'm going to be focusing on Wrestlemania 13. We started off the show with a four-way tag team elimination match which featured the New Blackjacks, the Godwins, the Headbangers and Doug Furnas and Philip LaFon. The winners of this match was the Headbangers. It was a pretty decent tag team match, to be honest. It was it flowed alright. It wasn't really no major botches from what I remember. Yeah, I can't remember in which order they were eliminated, but I think it ended up with Furnas and LaFon against the Headbangers. I'm not too sure, but the Headbangers got the win in the end. This match is very of the time as well, because all four tag teams had distinct gimmicks. Back then, they used to have tag teams with distinct gimmicks. They were really set apart from the other tag teams. Like, for example, the Headbangers were a team of like punks. The New Blackjacks were like a team of like old school cowboys. The Godwins like a team of farmers. And the other team, all Furnas and LaFon, they were just like a real wrestling tag team. So all four teams had distinct styles and distinct gimmicks, where like they're all set apart from each other. And there's no one else on the roster who really like any of these either. Yeah, it was an alright match. It went about 11 minutes. We got really no complaints about that match. Then we had Rocky Maivia defending the Intercontinental title against the Sultan, who ended up being Rikishi in a later life. And this was quite a poor match, if I'm being honest. I remember when I was watching it at the time thinking that this is rubbish. Even back then when I was like a kid and a proper mark, I just didn't like this whatsoever. The highlight of the build-up was that the Sultan had both Bob Backlund and the Iron Sheik in his corner, and like they were both former world champions. So like the Sultan had like a nice little backup behind him, like two former world champions. That's a great backup, isn't it? And then The Rock had Tony Atlas behind him. And then on the night of the match at WrestleMania, Rocky Johnson got involved, The Rock's dad. I think they stripped him of all of his clothes, apart from maybe his pants. Just stripped his shirt, and he looks in alright shape for his age as well. But then they fended him off after the match, and yeah, The Rock picked up the win and kept hold of the IC title. But he really wasn't a polished product at the moment. He was really quite poor, like especially on this night against the Sultan. He was very poor. Next match was Triple H versus Goldust, the blow off to the feud. Like leading up to it, they would been having a lot of build up of who's this mystery woman who's with Triple H. We found out that she was called Chyna, and basically she was used on the outside to bully Marlena, who was with Goldust at the time. The match ended by Chyna, like Goldust had the upper hand on Triple H, and then Chyna started to stalk Marlena. Marlena climbed on the apron. Goldust stops piling the pressure on Triple H, goes over to Marlena to save her. Triple H bumps Goldust into Marlena. She goes flying through the air into Chyna's arms. Chyna then like tosses her around like a rag doll. It's a fantastic sell from Marlena. She literally looked like a rag doll in the arms of Chyna, and Chyna just like tossing her from side to side. That must have like messed her head quite a little bit. Yeah, then Triple H turns around and gets the pedigree on Goldust and gets the win. Then afterwards, Goldust is looking at Marlena in the ring, making sure she's alright, and Triple H and Chyna head off into the distance with the victory. Then we had a tag team titles match with the British Bulldog and Owen Hart defending the titles against Mankind and Vader. Just before this, the British Bulldog and Owen Hart had faced each other in the final of the European title tournament, which was held in Germany, which is the worst episode of Raw that I've ever seen. I highly suggest you don't bother watching that episode, but it was a really good match between Owen Hart and the Bulldog, probably the match of the year so far, which I've seen up until this event anyway. And yeah, Owen Hart and the Bulldog managed to defend the title successfully. Actually no, it ended up being a double count out, but yeah, they didn't lose the titles. It was an alright match, nothing amazing about it. Then we had Bret Hart versus Stone Cold Steve Austin in what has been dubbed even to this day as one of the best matches of all time. Now, the main thing that people talk about when they talk about this match is the fact that Bret Hart went into it as a face and Austin went into it as a heel. But when they left the match and the match had been over, Austin came out as the face and Hart came out as the heel, and it was the first time like in a match of such significance, like such a big pay-per-view, where both guys had like switched roles during the match and then come out like on the opposite side of the spectrum. Basically how they did it was they battled throughout the match. Like both were shown as like tough competitors. Then in the end, Bret Hart had cut Austin open. Austin was like bleeding profusely from the head, like just fully crimson mask. Then he's got Austin in the sharpshooter. Instead of tapping out, Austin just passes out. And it was a submission match. So the referee calls the bell, and Hart gets the win. And Hart doesn't release the sharpshooter, and then the referee has to like pull Hart off. Now this is a thing that doesn't really get mentioned, but I'll go into that in a minute. But yeah, that's how Hart became the heel, by just keeping hold of that sharpshooter on the injured Austin, the bleeding Austin. He's down and out, and still Hart won't let go of this sharpshooter on Austin. And then Austin still fights courageously, even though he's got a crimson mask, and doesn't give up. So he was shown to be really courageous, and that's how he turned face, and that's how Hart turned heel, just by not releasing on this courageous warrior who's just giving his all, and Hart just wants to keep taking liberties after the bell. Now, this is a really important part of the match, in my opinion. It was a submissions match, and they got a special guest referee for it, and it was Ken Shamrock, who had just been the UFC heavyweight champion. So at the time, he was like a really high profile figure basically in the mixed martial arts world, and he's left the mixed martial arts world to come to the WWF. Now at the time, the WWF were and pro wrestling was seen as a higher form of entertainment and higher value than MMA fighting, whereas now it's like gone the opposite way, with UFC really getting into its own and dominating the WWF. Back then WWF was dominating the UFC, and then they took one of their best guys in Ken Shamrock, who's like listed as the world's most dangerous man at the time as well. They'd taken him from the UFC and then used him as their own referee, and then he ended up working for WWE full time. That was a real coup for WWE, in my opinion, or WWF should I say, to get Ken Shamrock back then. But yeah, Hart got the win on Austin in that match, which is still to this day rated as a 5-star classic. Then we had a match which didn't really make sense to me. It was the Legion of Doom and Ahmed Johnson against the Nation of Domination in a Chicago street fight. The entire build up to this match was Ahmed Johnson and Farouk's rivalry. In this match, this should have been the massive blow off between Ahmed and Farouk, where Ahmed finally went over Farouk and then managed to continue on his singles push. But the WWF just brought it back in, the Road Warriors, Hawk and Animal, so they decided to make this match a little bit more interesting for the fans by adding in Hawk and Animal and then making it Nation of Domination versus the Road Warriors and Ahmed Johnson. But to me, it didn't add to the match, it took away from it, because we wanted to see Ahmed versus Farouk one-on-one, mano-a-mano, who is going to be the better man. And we didn't see that, because we saw him in a tag team situation. Everyone knows in a tag team situation you get diffused because of other people diluting the match and stuff, so it didn't really come out that well. But the LOD and Ahmed Johnson ended up getting the win. Then the main event was Undertaker against the world's heavyweight champion Psycho Sid, and as we all know, Undertaker's undefeated at WrestleMania, so obviously he got the win in this no disqualification match. It was an alright match, nothing too special. This should have been an In Your House pay-per-view, main event, rather than a WrestleMania main event. This is not a WrestleMania main event whatsoever. Undertaker Sid, I like Sid, he's an alright wrestler, but I don't think he ever should have main evented a WrestleMania, if I'm being totally honest. And he'd main evented the previous two big pay-per-views in Royal Rumble and Survivor Series, so you could see WWE were really getting behind him at this moment in time. But yeah, overall this pay-per-view was not good whatsoever. It would have been a really good In Your House, but for WrestleMania it just pales in significance, like in comparison to other cards. This is probably the worst WrestleMania of the 90s in my opinion. Obviously we've had some, like I was going to say it was one of the worst ones of all time, but we've had some in later years that have been absolutely dreadful, and some of the early ones were horrible, like WrestleMania 1 and WrestleMania 2, both poor, if you ask me. But yeah, WrestleMania 13 was a really poor card. For those of you who've seen it and agree with me, disagree with me, let me know what you think about the card, and yeah, write it down in the comment section. Also, head over to my channel where I've got my moderator section up, so if you want to ask me a question on there, you can, and I'll get back to you on that. And yeah, I guess with that I'm out. Please rate, comment and subscribe, and keep tuning in. Thanks.